Welcome to my channel, Veteran's Legacy. Today's story is not just about shooting or targets. It's about respect, time, and the kind of quiet power only a true soldier carries, even when the world has forgotten. It was a cool Saturday morning at the local shooting range. The kind of morning where sunlight just begins to burn through the mist, and the faint smell of gunpowder mixes with fresh cut grass. A group of younger men stood near the benches, laughing and joking as they unpacked their shiny rifles and scopes. Most of them were regulars, hobby shooters, weekend warriors, proud of their precision and their polished gear. They competed over who could hit the smallest grouping at 100 yards, bragging rights on the line. Then, from the parking lot, came the slow shuffle of worn boots. An old man, maybe in his late 70s, wearing a faded green jacket that looked like it had seen more than its share of history. His hat bore a patch, the emblem of a unit no one there seemed to recognize. He carried an old, scratched rifle, the kind you'd expect to see in a museum, not on a modern range. The laughter quieted for a moment as he approached the benches, his steps measured, his eyes calm. Then one of the younger men nudged his friend and smirked. "Hey, Pops, you sure you're in the right place?" The old man gave a polite nod. "Just thought I'd put a few rounds downrange. Been a while." Another chuckle rippled through the group. Someone whispered loud enough for others to hear, "Yeah, he'll be lucky to hit the dirt, let alone the target." The veteran smiled slightly, not offended. He just set his rifle case on the table and opened it. Inside was a weapon that looked like it had seen another lifetime, the wood dark and worn smooth by decades of use. But it was clean, oiled, and perfectly cared for. He took his time setting up, adjusting nothing fancy, no bipods, no scopes, just iron sights. The young shooters finished their warm-ups, hitting targets and slapping each other on the back with laughter and mock applause. Then came his turn. The range officer, a man in his 30s with mirrored sunglasses, called over, "You ready, sir?" The old man nodded, loading a single round with a deliberate calm. "All right, lane's hot, fire when ready." The veteran lifted his rifle, steady hands defying his age. He looked through the sights, took a slow breath, the kind of breath that comes from training, from years of repetition. Bang! The rifle cracked like thunder. A puff of dust rose behind the target. The young men laughed out loud. "Guess he's a little rusty," one said, grinning. Another added, "Maybe the old-timer forgot how to aim." Even the range officer smiled a little, though politely. The veteran just gave a slow nod, then lowered his rifle and began reloading another round. Again, he aimed, breathed in deeply, and fired. Bang! Once more, the dirt behind the target jumped. "Man, he's shooting high," someone said. "You're scaring the clouds, old man." This time, even the officer raised an eyebrow. The veteran didn't react. He loaded again. Slow, precise. Third shot. Bang. Dust kicked up behind the target once more. The laughter came easy and loud now. The young men had phones out, pretending to record. One of them whispered, "This is going viral. Grandpa's first time at the range." The veteran stood still, silent, eyes on the target. Then, without a word, he placed his rifle on the table, removed his hat, and looked at the range officer. "Son," he said softly, "mind checking my target?" The officer hesitated, a little uncomfortable now, but nodded. "Sure, sir." He walked downrange, clipboard in hand. The laughter continued behind him. Someone said, "Don't bother, it's clean." But when the range officer reached the target and looked closer, his steps slowed. Then he looked past the target, and froze. A long, low whistle escaped his lips. When he came back, his face was pale, his voice a little unsteady. "Gentlemen," he said, "you might want to see this." The young shooters walked down, still joking, until they saw what he was pointing at. Behind the paper target, embedded deep in the thick dirt wall, were 3 perfect holes, all in a straight vertical line, about 2 inches apart. But there was no mark on the paper target itself. The old veteran hadn't missed. He'd been shooting through the same hole, the one hidden behind the frame of the paper target, where the wooden post supported it. Each round had gone dead center, punching through the same spot again and again, invisible from the front. The laughter died instantly. Silence filled the air, heavy and awkward. The officer turned to the veteran, his tone now filled with genuine respect. "Sir, Those shots were perfect. Dead on center. The only reason they didn't hit the paper is because you were zeroed in on the post behind it. The old man smiled faintly. Guess I still remember a thing or two. No one said a word. The only sound was the faint clicking of the old rifle as he emptied the chamber. He packed up slowly, the same way he came. But before leaving, he turned toward the group. Young men, he said quietly, don't ever judge a man by the years he's lived. Judge him by the ones he's earned. He put his hat back on, gave a small salute to the range officer, and walked back toward his truck. When the sound of his boots faded, one of the younger men finally spoke. Who was that guy? The officer looked down at the clipboard where he'd signed in earlier. Name says, Sergeant Daniel Harlan, retired, U.S. Army, 3rd Ranger Battalion. A moment passed. One of the men whispered, wait, wasn't that the unit in? Yeah, another interrupted, remembering. The one from Operation Anaconda. The one where they were surrounded and fought their way out. They all went quiet again. The same hands that had missed a target had once held the line under fire. The same calm eyes that seemed too old for the range had once seen things most of them could never imagine. The officer stood for a long moment, then walked back to the target, running his hand gently over the clean wood of the post. He shook his head, smiling to himself. Perfect shots, he murmured. Right through the heart. Later that evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the range officer sat alone in the control booth. He found himself thinking about that quiet old soldier, about how easily the young men had laughed, and how quickly they had been silenced by the truth. He took out his phone and replayed the security footage. The veteran's movements were slow, deliberate, steady, no hesitation, no wasted motion. Decades of discipline in every breath. And as the officer watched, he realized something else. After the third shot, just before lowering his rifle, the old man had closed his eyes for a brief second, as if remembering something. Someone. Maybe he wasn't just aiming at a target. Maybe, in that moment, he was back somewhere far away, hearing echoes of old battles, seeing faces long gone. The officer leaned back, a lump rising in his throat. There was something sacred about that silence, something too deep to be explained. The next weekend, the same group of young shooters returned to the range. But this time, before unpacking, they looked over at the bench where the old veteran had stood. One of them quietly placed a small American flag on the table. Another set a single bullet beside it. No one said anything. They just nodded, a silent promise of respect. And as the morning light spread across the field, the officer watched them line up. No jokes this time, no arrogance, just quiet focus. Maybe, he thought, that was the old man's real target all along. Not the wood, not the paper, but their hearts. Because a true veteran doesn't just hit what's in front of him, he reaches what's beyond it.